Dear Digital Eclipse, please find enclosed a series of IOUs entitling your entire staff down to janitorial and QA to free body massages, redeemable on the island of Montreal, Canada. No expiration date. Redeemable in perpetuity. Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. I'm Shad. You might remember me from such past Netherkast episodes as Spawn's pretty cool, I guess. And I watched MK11 Aftermath story mode, and all I got was this lousy stroke. Well, I came here today to do something a little bit different from our recent output, such as it's been. Not just to react to anything, not to do any top 10 lists, rankings, but to do something hitherto untold of on this channel of ours, and that's to share my pure, unbridled joy. I know. Scary, isn't it? If you're an MK fan, odds are you've been following the recent news about the MK Legacy Collection. And there's been quite a bit of it since Cyborg and I did our last video about it. And let me tell you, I'm over the moon. Okay, I'm a pig in shit. I'm Shang and Soul-nado, my friends. Because we're on the cusp of getting something very long overdue. Something I've wanted to see for no small amount of years now. The original MK arcade games getting the kind of wide release that they deserve. That and so very much more. Home version ports of all kinds, a music player, an interactive timeline, interviews, behind the scenes stuff. It's a smorgasbord of selection, an embarrassment of riches. But as anyone following along now knows, there's a few select items missing. Let's be real. A 100% complete, spell that with a K, collection of every release of every version of every MK released on every platform is the stuff of which dreams are made, but it is also the stuff of development nightmares. Kind of a pipe dream, if you will. And we should all understand that. And we should all understand that Digital Eclipse are not a monolithic mega company. Their resources, not infinite. That said, I think, personally, we should be grateful as hell for what we are getting. Because we're getting a lot, oh so very much, and somehow some people out there still don't seem to be satisfied. But let's dig in, shall we? Let's dissect the ins and outs. I'm going to talk about a lot of things, but I'd be remiss if I didn't just start by focusing on the fact that we'll all be able to just boot up and play MK1 through Ultimate 3 and 4 anytime we want, online or solo. Let's start with that. We haven't had re-releases of the original trilogy on console since the 7th console generation, PS3, Xbox 360, with that MK Arcade collection that has its own strange history. Its own share of problems with subpar online play, and there's never, ever up to date been a Steam release of any kind of classic MK up until now. Savor that. Think about it, just breathe it in. We can do that now. It's on Steam. It's going to be up there forever. And there's rollback netcode, and these games are going to finally get the love and the treatment and the exposure that they deserve for whole new audiences. And we can play with almost anyone we want, anytime we want. We're starting with that. Starting with that. It's incredible that it took so long. And it's amazing that it's finally happening. Now, item number 2 I would like to simply gush about is the fact that we're about to get a very largely fixed-up version of Mortal Kombat Trilogy. The main version, most famously on PlayStation, but which versions thereof are also on Saturn, Windows, and DOS, for those of you familiar with the rest of the scope of that release. What we do not have is the unique N64 version, and I will get to that later. Now, we have had load times virtually, if not entirely, eliminated. We have confirmation on that. Old friend of the Netherkast, former YouTuber extraordinaire and political figure, Brusque Poet, was at Gamescom and was lovely enough to pass on a few questions that I had for him at the time. In addition to the by now well-known fact that loading times have been eliminated, which kind of kneecaps PlayStation MK Trilogy's greatest flaw and enables Shang Tsung to be fully playable without the need to select specific characters like you originally had to, and everyone would select a ninja, and so you'd be fighting Shang that could turn into ninjas, nobody else. It was kind of maddening. Anyway, after I prompted Brust to ask about potential balance changes because Trilogy is famously a very broken game, he reported that they said, quote, "Balance changes are there, but some stuff has been left in there because they didn't want to tinker with creative choices. They wanted to focus on fixing stuff that was clearly not meant to be there. Setting aside for the moment that we can, yes, still expect some characters to be much more powerful than others, let's just consider that for a moment. A playable, online, PlayStation MK Trilogy with no loading times and balance adjustments. Noob Saibot might no longer be an instant death character. We might not have infinite rain roundhouse high punch juggle combos. Pop-up juggle restand combos. I'm still digesting it, really. To me, this is immense. MK Trilogy and the home versions of MK3 have historically enjoyed small tournament scenes, usually abroad. But those have always been what I'd consider to be lesser versions of the whole Ultimate MK Trilogy experience, let's say. Not ideal, but close. And now what we have here is, for the first time, a widely available, heavily optimized version of the version of Trilogy I'd argue is closest to the UMK3 arcade experience. All versions of Trilogy had their flaws, but this is basically the version of the game I always wanted to see. Almost. And they didn't stop there, they're fixing so much shit. Fixing. MK Trilogy on PlayStation originally had this ugly sound bug. See, the MK3 music tracks were mixed and mastered in high quality at 48 kHz. When Avalanche Software was working on Trilogy, they basically threw those tracks in as is. They didn't account for the fact that CD Redbook audio maxed out at 44.1 kHz. So the end result is that roughly half the music in Trilogy is played at approximately 0.992 times their original speed, at a slower tempo and pitch. Digital Eclipse have fixed that. They've also fixed the aggressor bug that when you turned it on it would still sometimes be active for like player 2 or the computer or what have you. They couldn't figure out what was causing it, so they put in like 6 or 7 fail-safes to make sure it would no longer happen. That's the kind of insane work they're doing on this thing. Seriously. Think about it. A widely accessible, polished version of MK Trilogy, playable for everyone without needing to boot up Fightcade or anything like that, without learning how emulators work. It's fantastic. There are no real entry barriers for anyone anymore. I mean, I'm probably dreaming, but I see an opportunity for a whole new tournament scene to emerge around Trilogy. They want this to kind of be a new de facto ultimate version of Trilogy, and it looks like they're succeeding. It's going to be freaking amazing! Breathe it in. Something that they do not appear to have fixed yet, if they plan to, is the fact that, in Trilogy, music would often play on incorrect stages. For example, on the Portal, you'd hear the Kombat 2 music instead. That was unfortunately the case with a fair number of stages out there. I would hope and pray and cross my fingers and beg them to match the tracks to the correct stages from MK1, 2, and 3. That would be best in my opinion. I could ask a little more. Except for maybe porting Chameleon from the N64 Trilogy and shoving her into this new one. Anyway, now on to item number 3. WaveNet. Fucking WaveNet Ultimate MK3. What is the WaveNet version of Ultimate MK3, you might ask? Well, if you've not seen a bunch of videos that have popped up on YouTube since the announcement, here's a history. WaveNet, which was an abbreviation of Williams Action Video Entertainment Network, was an online system implemented for San Francisco Rush and UMK3 in 1996. In Ultimate MK3's case, it was supposed to be one final revision of the arcade game, which saw an extremely limited August 96, 1997 release in Chicago, and apparently San Francisco arcades, maybe New York too, no one seems to be sure. And when we say limited, we mean there probably weren't any more than 10 to 12 arcade cabinets produced in total, and nobody is even really certain of the number. There might have been vanilla MK3 WaveNet machines even, no one seems to know, nobody's sure. The cabinets used a dedicated T1 line which connected to Midway's Chicago offices, and the plan was, according to a 1996 article in issue number 20 of Next Generation Gaming magazine, for Williams to use the WaveNet network to upload new games and updates directly to arcades, in exchange for a cut of each game's revenue. Now, it never took off, and the infrastructure was dismantled for various reasons, most likely largely because it was cost prohibitive. T1 lines were very expensive. Setting up the whole thing cost several $1,000s per install, plus a few hundred for each cabinet which used the hardware. So the WaveNet version of UMK3 effectively became lost media. No UMK3 WaveNet ROMs were ever dumped, and it became the stuff of a legend, this mysterious version of the game that vanished into thin air that almost nobody ever played, probably no more than 500 by reports, that we would likely never ever see. The major detail that was known then is that Noob Saibot was a fully playable character, usable by selecting Kano and entering the human smoke code or some sort of variation of it. I personally remember reading on a news group in like 98 or something that the combination was actually down low punch, low kick, block and run instead of back high punch, high kick, block and run. There were also a bunch of balance changes and supposedly a ton of Easter eggs and secrets exclusive to that release. I have wanted to play UMK3 WaveNet for nearly 30 years. It's finally happening. And I still can't believe it. This is the stuff of legend, this piece of lost history that's been unearthed that I've always wished for, and now it's going to be available for us all. We know so little, we still know so little apart from rumors, little facts and hearsay. I mean, you've seen the trailer. Did you know that Noob Saibot left a trail of green shadows behind him like Nightwolf or Johnny Cage when he did his teleport? Did you know he had a teleport in WaveNet? Nobody I know of was even sure of that fact until we saw that video. Nobody. No one knew what he had. There's so much to unpack and it's just a little under a month away. I can't wait. You know, one of the first details about this Legacy Collection that became known was that we were finally going to get a playable version of Arcade MK4, which is another thing that nobody's been able to play since the late 90s. Properly, anyway. And that alone blew my mind, and I'm going to get to that in a second, but... like... how the hell do you announce a playable MK4 arcade version and then arguably top that news by revealing WaveNet? Alright, okay, more. For shits and giggles, let me read some of the little rumors surrounding WaveNet off of an old TestDRMite post by user Dead, who was a long-time prominent member of the MK community. This post is from 2011, and he got these facts from, quote, various people and old internet sources. You need 3 tokens to start, then after 10 wins, the message, continue your winning streak comes up, and then you have to put in 2 more tokens to continue playing, and then every 5 wins after that, you have to put in 2 more tokens to continue. Costly. Balance changes include Kung Lao's spin being disabled after 3 hits, Striker's gun being disabled after 5 hits, before Cabal performs his spin you can apparently hear a sound, and supposedly 4 frames of animation are added to his dash startup. People also said that Cyrax's throw juggled the foe higher to prevent, like, combos, I guess, maybe, or enable more, and Nightwolf's third axe in a combo is apparently much more difficult to connect. Quote, when you try an infinite combo like Kung Lao's or Striker's, a whistle will blow and one of a series of messages will appear such as stop cheating or KMD. What that means? Your guess is as good as mine. Other unconfirmed stuff. Ermac's telekinetic slam had a larger area of effect. You can do 99% combos, but then it apparently just stops doing damage and the opponent will stay on danger no matter what if the juggle continues. Noob Saibot's teleport move had a hit limit apparently. Next little bit. At the MK3 WaveNet Edition screen, press and hold Start, Right, and all buttons except for Low Punch. The screen will start flashing through different stages, like when you put in an ultimate combat code, and then Raiden, Rain, and Noob Saibot will all pop up and perform their winning stances. Then an MK1 and MK2 arcade machine falls down behind them. If you enter this button combination before the title screen, the game will say Nitro Edition and not WaveNet Edition. This is just really fascinating stuff. Before the machine boots, press and hold Run. Once it boots, instead of saying downloading WaveNet data, it'll say rewinding cassette deck. There was an option to change your nickname during the match, and some players often did that so they didn't get the loss. Weird. Anyway, I'm still looking forward to finding out how much of this stuff is real and how much is bullshit. It's like being back in the arcades, it's amazing. So, Dan Emmerich, content editor at Digital Eclipse, in an interview with MK Secrets, has cited Stephanie Brownback at NRS for putting forth a suggestion to do UMK3 WaveNet. The guys at D didn't even think it was available, understandably, until she suggested it. That's how lost this thing's been. So from the bottom of my little black heart, thank you, Stephanie, for this. Truly. You've done the history of Mortal Kombat and the fans one of the biggest services anyone could ever hope to do, just by making that suggestion. Thank you for bridging this gap, for making this possible. Now, let's talk about MK4, the next pants-shittingly amazing part of this collection and one of the very first things that we learned about. And let's talk about why this is a big deal. Once again, nobody has really been able to properly play arcade MK4 since its original release. The arcade version hadn't been emulated properly. For many years it was very impossible, and the reason for this, the hardware it was built on. MK4 was built on the Zeus chip, a midway custom 3D controller which was capable of high polygon rates for the time. Now the problem with getting arcade MK4 emulated was that there was practically no documentation for the Zeus chip anywhere. Here's a quote from Shinnok XZ on the TRMK forums data from 2005 when he asked on Usenet about it. It's like looking into an endless dark box. They simply don't know what to do with the ROM's code. Not without any documentation. Now, MAME developers out there have worked on getting MK4 emulated for a long-ass time via reverse engineering. They've come very close. It is up and running these days, but still, things aren't quite perfect. There are still some lighting issues, and you apparently need a very powerful PC to run it. If you want a good, accessible MK4 experience, you're probably still best off getting the GOG.com version. And that's still not quite there. There's some problems with the blood effects. The PlayStation version of MK4 was serviceable, and it had new FMV endings rather than the arcade version's in-game cutscenes. More on that later. But it still wasn't quite arcade perfect, and obviously neither was the N64 version. Let's just say the perfect MK4 arcade experience doesn't really exist. Yet. Now, Digital Eclipse did a collection of Atari games called the Atari 50th Anniversary Collection a little while ago. And to make that possible, they built an Atari Jaguar emulator, and they're taking the same approach to bring us MK4. Stephen Frost, head of production at Digital Eclipse, has told us in a Games Radar interview that they're trying to make their emulated version as accurate as possible, that they're aiming for a pure arcade experience. The initial brief look that we got of MK4 in action from the collection's first trailer left some of us with some concerns that their emulation would still leave a bit to be desired, or that the game looked rougher than we remembered it. However, and I've had to go back into this recording session to make some adjustments here, Digital Eclipse have just released some screenshots which look to be very good, and have given us the option to use 2x and 4x resolution rendering modes to smooth out the graphics and give them a more updated look. Now when I say that they've gone above and beyond, this is what I'm talking about. Digital Eclipse are giving these games the love they've always deserved. Plus, a look at the pause menu shows us that we can switch to alt costumes, or meet, on the fly. I'm just blown away by all of this. It's insane the work that these guys are doing. Once again, breathe it in. Next up, MK Mythologies and MK Special Forces. Oh, you poor motherfuckers aren't ready. I cannot wait to read all the exasperated posts on social media and message boards everywhere from people suffering through these games for the first time. If you've been listening to us, you know I love them. I love these games despite their many flaws. I truly do. All I'm going to say is this. So happy to have them aboard. And you guys are lucky they're implementing a rewind feature into this thing, because you are gonna need it. I wish I had that shit in 1997 and 2001. You guys are gonna have it easy, don't forget that. I'm looking forward to the footage. Next up, MK Tournament Edition and Deadly Alliance for Game Boy Advance. Now, as soon as we learned that we were getting these two, immediately the calls of, well, why are these here and not console MKDA, MK Deception, and Armageddon? Why are these things not present? And yeah, you know what, I'll say it is kinda weird that they chose to have these present in a collection where their parent games aren't. But I'm still kinda grateful to have them. If it were me, maybe I'd have held those back for a theoretical second collection of games, with 3D games included, but I'm not going to say no to having them present now. I mean, if you're going to make one Game Boy Advance game playable, might as well have them all, right? And they had to with MK Advance. Looking forward to seeing people learn about that time Sector took over Japan. Okay, so we've covered the good stuff. And that's not even counting all the little extras we've had glimpses of, all the little bonus stuff behind the scenes, which I'm kind of trying not to look at and know too much about because I want to be surprised. Music player and stuff, and all that stuff I can't even begin to fathom what's about to happen. That's the good stuff. Let's talk about what's not in, why it sucks, and how I think we should feel about it. You probably know where I'm going with this. First off, not a game, but crossplay itself. This is one of the questions that Brustpoet asked for us at Gamescom. Is there crossplay? Is there not? And they answered, and they've been kind of answering people ever since. So it's not happening, not on release anyways, and I know that that's disappointing, but please do consider. Crossplay is a very, very difficult thing to get done, even on major AAA game releases, let alone collections of retro games. You basically have to work magic. You gotta get all the first-party companies on board with it. Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. And you have to make sure you, put generic images in for people that you're playing on other platforms. You can't be playing on Xbox and see PlayStation trademarks and vice versa. And there's a lot of ugly legal wrangling involved, right down to, how much money people get and stuff that's not for us to know. Trust me when I say I've seen what needs to happen in order to make it happen, and it's a goddamn nightmare. It requires months of work. The lack of it at launch does not surprise me in the least, and to that I can only really say, throw up my hands and go, sucks, but oh well. I mean, I'll be amazed if it happens at all. Do I want it? Absolutely, sure. I'd love for it to happen. That big rainbow bridge that connects every player across every system, it'd be great. I'd love it. But we're already getting so much amazing stuff that they've worked so hard at giving us. That's going to be my main sticking point of defense. And Digital Eclipse has worked so goddamn hard on all of this, fixing Trilogy, bringing us MK4, bringing us goddamn WaveNet UMK3. Think about how much work they've had to do to make all of this stuff possible. Emulating all these games across all these different platforms. There was no way they could reasonably do all of that and also pull off crossplay on launch. Even if they had the go-ahead for it, which I'm pretty sure probably just didn't. So, yeah, if it happens, great, but it didn't happen for any of Capcom's recent fighting collections. And like I said, it's hard enough to get it going for big titles, big AAA stuff. It's the kind of thing you have to plan for in, alpha stages of game development, so I'm not holding my breath. Plus, I'm buying it on multiple platforms anyway, so I personally can't say I care too much. Now, there's a whole slew of lesser-known ports of stuff that's just not on the collection that we know of. I'm just going to rattle off. First off, the Tiger Electronics handheld versions of MK1, Mythologies Sub-Zero, and that weird Tiger R-Zone version of MK3, whatever the hell that thing was. I think there's a trilogy version of that up on that thing too. I don't expect these to be there, but I honestly kind of wouldn't mind them. I didn't own those Tiger handhelds, but I had a Mega Man 3 one, which I played to death when I was a kid. So, Tiger's a special little bit of nostalgia for me. I think quite a few kids had one game or two on one of those things. It's probably never going to happen. I imagine it's a logistical nightmare. But I gotta throw up my hat and say, yeah, I'd be interested. I mean, the fact that there's an MK Mythologies Sub-Zero version just blows people's minds. No one seems sure if it's a meme or not. I think it's real. Next up, bunch of weird stuff. The Amiga versions of MK1 and 2, the Sega Master System versions of MK1 and 2, the Game Gear version of MK2, and both the Game Boy and Game Gear versions of MK3. So that's a small pile of tiny ports that are still missing to date. I have no personal attachment to any of the above or any real interest beyond nostalgia personally. I never played most of them. Of course, most folks stateside never played the Game Gear MK3 because it only ever came out in Europe. But that's the thing, you've always got to assume that somebody out there has an attachment to these things for what they were. Somebody's childhood is here, and somebody's childhood is missing. So it's a shame not to see them present at all for whatever reason. My bet is probably licensing issues, development priorities, and more on that in a little bit. What do we need and what do we not need is a question. Obviously, from a game preservation standpoint, the answer is yes, everything. And every port was special to someone out there, assuming you were around at the time. But, like, me personally, at a certain point, I can't be too let down if I don't have certain things. You know, things that are like 50 to 90% close to being arcade perfect and not quite, like, I don't know, PS1 Mortal Kombat 3, DOS versions of the games. Like, I find the most interesting things to include in this would be those limited 16 and 8-bit handheld games and stuff like that. Like, they're more interesting to me because they're such different little beasts with their limitations. I'm glad we got MK1 on Game Boy while we're here. Like, we can play as Goro in that uniquely, and that was always pretty awesome. I'm happy for that. The Sega CD version of MK1 being absent stands out to me, though, that we know of. And that probably falls into that weird category of middle ground, but I remember how hyped up all the gaming magazine ads were for it at the time. It was like, it's even closer to being arcade perfect. So yeah, that's a shame. I'd like to see that. Maybe we need it, maybe we don't. I'm never going to say no to more. When I hear things like they couldn't get permission to include the Genesis/Mega Drive version of UMK3, I guess I'm a bit put out, but not too much, really. I don't know. Dan Amrich answered that one in the MK Secrets interview. I'm gonna have to link you guys to that if you haven't seen it already. We are not getting Genesis UMK3 because they couldn't get the permissions, unfortunately. Now, conversely, I remember the SNES version of UMK3 being kinda terrible. They were really pushing the limits of what those cartridges could hold at the time. Like, Noob and Rain only had stage fatalities. They had to remove Shiva entirely to make space for them. And there was this horrible glitch where what was left of her could pop up if you played in tournament mode and, like, did random select. She'd have this endurance letter E for a logo and appear as a bunch of glitched out assets, and she'd cause the game to hang and crash, and that was the SNES version. I've personally never played Genesis UMK3, but I can only assume it was just as bad, if not worse. Hell, I remember the Saturn version of UMK3 had some pretty awful loading times, too. There's no reason for me to really play any of those ports when I had two completely different versions of Trilogy to choose from, each with their own flaws, but far more preferable as options. I'm just lucky that my mom got me a PS1 and a friend of mine had an N64. So I don't know, maybe we can get that version of Genesis UMK3 in someday for those of us who want it. But I don't think we should sweat it much. If it happens, great. We know that they tried, at least. So we've already covered how amazing it is that they chose the PlayStation version of Trilogy and are basically just jacking it up to be the best it can possibly be. If I have even one version that's been souped up like that, personally, I need nothing else, so I'm not too asked about other versions of Trilogy being absent, except for one. MK Trilogy and MK Mythology is on the N64, that's my next point. So Dan Amrich, once again, in the MK Secrets interview, said that they had resources for only one round of emulation development on a console. So they effectively had to choose between being able to emulate Trilogy Mythologies on either PlayStation or an N64. So they went with PlayStation, and in my humble opinion, they absolutely made the right choice. I have played both versions of Trilogy to death over the years, and the clear winner for me is almost every non-64 version. Preference for PC, so no loading times, but obviously. Now don't get me wrong, like, there's plenty of reasons to really want MK Trilogy on 64 too, especially. I'd say we definitely need it. Of the two, it is the one with more of a history of actual competitive play, such as that scene is, largely because the absence of loading times made it a lot more viable as a choice. It's also got a broken, unique monstrosity of an amalgamated Sub-Zero with all the moves of the masked and the unmasked versions. And of course, for us lore nerds obsessed with every character and every version, it has Lady Chameleon as an exclusive. It's also got some silly little boss fatalities from Motaro and Shao Kahn that aren't on the other systems. It's also got its own unique cheat menus, its own little bizarre stage transitions, like Goro's lair into the armory, into the combat tomb. Something like that. It's got its own Shao Kahn treasures on completion of the game, like more than the PlayStation version. There's like 2 straight whole rows. It's got its own combat codes. Like, the list is endless. N64 Trilogy is different enough from every other version out there that I really almost consider it a different game. I do consider it an absolute necessity to have it in any collection aiming to call itself definitive. It is a very different beast from the Trilogy which appeared on all other platforms. But it's not perfect. Graphics and sound inferior to other editions of Trilogy. It's missing a lot of animation frames because the N64 was still not quite the system with the power that an absolute version of Trilogy would need. We were still dealing with limited cartridge space, don't forget. So given the choice between the two major versions of the game, going with PlayStation just makes the most sense to me. With its loading times removed, even if I had both, PlayStation would be the one that I'd be playing the most going forward, no question. And as for MK Mythology's Sub-Zero, it's as simple as, well, still images and text for actually hearing and seeing Richard DeVizio ham it up as Quan Chi. Not a contest. PlayStation all the way. Now, I had asked Brusque Poet, once more, at Gamescom to ask them about N64 Trilogy, and he said, and I quote, "They tried to get the N64 version of MK Trilogy, but Nintendo was being a bitch apparently." Now, I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't want to cast shade where it's not warranted. But it's possible that even with the decision to shoot for PS emulation over Nintendo emulation aside, maybe Ninty were being uncooperative. Maybe the latter was a factor in the decision to go with the former. It wouldn't surprise me. I know Nintendo traditionally play a lot of hardball sometimes. Whatever the case, I do hope that we can still get M64 Trilogy in one day. Maybe as DLC, I'd love that. It's very sorely missed. It's a major part of the series' history. But they only had the resources to go with one for now, so for now we can just wait and hope. Maybe one day. Now let's talk about MK4 and how weird it is that the arcade version of it is the only one we seem to be getting and why that seems to be. First off, we're not getting the Game Boy Color version of MK4. Mr. Amrick said it was not given the green light and he did not seem entirely sure why himself. Well, I don't know why either, but I can think of two reasons it should be present. I hope for it. First off, it's the only official 2D version of MK4 out there, for what that's worth. And second, lore nerd alert, because it had text endings for the characters, one of which was Reiko's. Now, if you know your MK history, from the time that MK4 came out up until Deception, Reiko's identity was a very frequently debated topic. Was he Shao Kahn? Was he not? Deception would eventually give us the confirmation that they were different people, but John Tobias did tell us that yes, at the time, Reiko was originally intended to be Shao Kahn in disguise. And his ending in the Game Boy Color version of MK4 states that he, quote, returns to rule the realm which he left as ruler supreme, to continue the attack on Earth as he did in the last Mortal Kombat. I mean, that bit of text alone to me justifies MK4 Game Boy Color's presence. It's insight into a little piece of lost intended history. People used to use that ending to argue that Reiko was Shao Kahn, and they were right, but in time they would also be wrong, you know? So I'd love to see that little bit of history preserved as well. Now, I've heard it speculated that this MK4 Game Boy Color port, which was developed by Digital Eclipse themselves many years ago in the mists of time, was just considered too archaic and bad to justify inclusion. I am not going to hold a candle over anyone's feet for a bad port from decades back, and if it's about being ashamed to put out something that they worked on all those years ago, they shouldn't be. You see, when you're actively including MK Special Forces and MK Advanced in your collection, I gotta say, game quality as a barometer for entry kinda goes out the window. No offense to anyone involved in the creation of said ports. I'm not judging, really. Man, MK Advance, I cannot really even begin to compute that one. The question isn't really why. I guess it's like, why not? That's a piece of MK history, alright. If you've never played it, you're gonna see. There was a reason that Dan Su over at EGM gave it the magazine's first ever score of 0 in the publication's history. I remember it all too well, and man, if you thought Special Forces was bad. But let's use MK4 on Game Boy to segue into the rest of the MK4 ports, because there seems to be a unifying reason as to why none of these are showing up either. Not PlayStation, not N64. MK4's home ports on those platforms were developed by Eurocom Entertainment Software, Eurocom for short, a little British dev studio which was active from 1988 to 2012, when it abruptly shut down. And prior to their MK4 ports, they also developed the Saturn port of Ultimate MK3, which, interestingly enough at the time of this recording, also does not appear to be a part of this beautiful new Legacy collection. Now, on Twitter, Digital Eclipse released the following statement on August the 22nd. Thank you everyone for your reception. Our goal for this collection has always been to include as many games from the classic arcade era between 92 to 97 that we can. We have titles ranging from the original MK arcade version up to PS1 era games in Mythologies and Special Forces, and anything in between that we could get our hands on. Please keep in mind that we strive to include every game possible. However, due to legal, licensing, and other technical issues beyond our control, some things are off the table. Stephen Frost himself echoed that exact same statement the same day, saying, I will repeat this again as it bears repeating, but we strive to include every game possible in every collection that we do. We are fans, and that is our number one goal all the time. However, sometimes we just can't due to licensing, legal, or technical issues beyond our control. Now, what follows is just a little bit of speculation on my part, a little bit of putting 2 and 2 together, maybe coming up with 5, but considering the fact that we have PS1 emulated versions of Trilogy and Mythologies, but no PS1 MK4, this leads me to believe that the use of the words legal and licensing very subtly points to our answers to why neither Eurocom port of MK4 is present, or the Saturn version of UMK3 while we are here. Incidentally, I played that Saturn port way back in the day. Atrocious loading times, comparable to Trilogy. I'd say there was no loss in its absence aside for the sake of preservation. So all this absolutely does suck, yes, and not for the least of reasons being that we don't get those nice FMV endings that were available on the PlayStation port, where there was this extra little bit to Reiko's ending that the arcade version didn't have, where we see Khan's helmet come down onto his head as he sits on the throne. And our boy Reiko's really getting the shaft here, isn't he? 2 endings that point to, is he Khan? They're just both kind of not there. Sadly, Digital Eclipse's hands seem to be kind of tied on this one. Like I said, I'm just glad that we got Arcade MK4 at all. And again, all we can do is really kind of hope and pray and cross our fingers that in the future, some kind of deal can be reached to license these ports from whoever holds the rights to them, assuming that's what's going on. And I have no earthly idea who those rights holders may be. Do you? If not, let's get digging. But you know what else was developed by Eurocom? Mortal Kombat Gold. Okay, look. Dan Amrick has said they'd love to do it. They know we want it. Stephen Frost knows we want it. They want you to know that they know that we want it. And you know that they know you want it. And you know that they know that we know that they would like to give it to us. I bet the cleaning staff at Digital Eclipse's building knows that we want it by this point. But as Dan has said in the MK Secrets interview, once again, everyone should really watch if you haven't, they only had the resources to work one round of console emulation for the time being, and they have just gotten a handle on their PS1 emulation, for now. To quote Dan, "This was our first time to move forward to PS1 emulation. Dreamcast is 4 years of advanced technology beyond that. So they just don't have the resources to do MK Gold right now, and yes, that sucks. And on top of that, there does seem to be what appears to be all this Eurocom situation nonsense, which of course, if true, also sucks. But the bottom line is we can't ask them to work magic when they've already done so much. I've seen a lot of takes on this whole MK Gold situation, and all of them give me a headache. No MK Collection is complete without it. Yes, I do agree, but no MK Collection would ever be truly complete because of the sheer amount of crap with a K that's out there. Think of it that way, you know? Yes, it's a giant missing piece. It's giant because that game gives us a playable Noob Saibot, Goro and Kitana, Melina, Kung Lao, Staples, Baraka, Cyrax, and Sector. It's undeniable that it's a sorely missed part of the original game's history. Oh yes. Yes, it is weird not to have it present in what MK4 is, what MK Deadly Alliance and Tournament Edition for the Game Boy Advance are in, and those came after. Yes, I agree completely. But we just can't do anything about it now. And then there's the other side. Oh, the game actually sucks. It's so buggy and broken. It's unbalanced. And it shouldn't be on here anyways. See, when I hear that, that's how I know those people have never played an arcade MK game in their fucking life, because there's not a goddamned original game that does not have broken characters, nonsense shit, or some kind of bugs present. Sonya Leg Grab Infinite in 1, Melina Air Size in 2, Sub-Zero and Cabal in Vanilla 3. I can go on. There is not a single MK arcade game that does not have broken shit in it. Not a one. How broken or buggy the game is beside the point. The point is to have them present. It's not unreasonable to want it in. It's also not unreasonable to be disappointed or saddened. I know I am. But they just can't do anything about it right now for so many reasons, and they've worked so hard already. Not to be a white knight, man, but look at what else they're giving us. Stop and think about it. Consider this, like Dan said, maybe it could be DLC later, if we're patient, if the game does well, if there's enough demand for it, which we know there is. If they can maybe come to an agreement with whoever's holding the rights to Eurocom's ports, assuming that's an obstacle throwing a monkey wrench into these works. Or maybe one day we'll get a second MK collection where we get the later years of MK Deadly Alliance, Deception, Unchained, Shaolin Monks, Armageddon. Maybe it could find a home there. It wouldn't be any more out of place or disconnected than the Deadly Alliance and Tournament Edition ports feel in this collection, I'll say that much. Hell, with all the direct story links from the gold endings that go into Deadly Alliance and Deception, there's an argument to be made that it would be pretty fitting to have it alongside those instead. It's a loss for sure, but we gotta take that loss for now and just try to enjoy what we do have, because there's just so goddamn much to savor even without that game present. And of course, lastly, when this thing was very first revealed, people were wondering, not unreasonably, whether those 3D era games themselves, DA, Deception, Unchained, Shaolin Monks, and Armageddon, would be included. And Dan has, yes, covered this one too. Some of the same reasons Gold is not present apply. Knowing what we know now, how hard they worked to get their own PS emulation up and running, how MK Gold is just off the table for all these reasons. You know, it obviously goes without saying that they're not going to have the time or ability to start emulating PS2, Xbox 360 games, GameCube, PSP, Wii, for those Deception expansions or that one-off Armageddon Lady Chameleon fix. Ah, that poor girl relegated to Nintendo consoles for so long. Anyway, assuming this release does well, which I suspect it very much will, those games would make for a very lovely 3D era compilation on their own, wouldn't you say? Seems logical to me. One day, to paraphrase Shao Kahn from the Jeff Roven MK novel, I would look forward to such an MK Legacy collection too. Well, those are my thoughts. Happy and sad both, but mainly very happy. And now comes the part where I answer a series of questions put forth to me in the Netherkast Discord by our very loyal audience, all of whom I love very much, and who have fucked up so very badly by indulging me. Ryoma asks, did you know there was an MK Trilogy port for the Gamecom? I did indeed. And if you are looking for more arguments that MK4 on Game Boy is not the worst thing ever, well... ugh. Seriously, it's fascinating. It's almost nice to see Trilogy's complete roster of 13 characters. Reptile, Melina, Nightwolf, Kitana, Raiden, Jade, Rain, Cyrax, Sector, Motaro, and Shao Kahn, with Noob and Ermac as hidden characters for some reason. Weird doesn't cover it. Like, there was also an early version that had Goro, Kintaro, Scorpion, both Smokes, and Classic Sub. But all we have of that is apparently some old screenshots and footage floating around. Like the Tiger Electronics games, I wouldn't be averse to seeing it in out of morbid curiosity if nothing else. Sure. Would that be DLC material? Why not? Spooky Bard asks, Question 1, regarding mythologies. Say they get rid of the turn button on top of the rewind feature. Exactly how much does this elevate this already overhated platformer? My answer would be a little bit, but it still wouldn't be the game we quite wish it was. The platforming remains a bitch, the computer AI is still classic, quote-unquote, MKAI. It's still going to be more playable with rewind, no doubt about it, but I expect to still see people pulling their hair out, and I look forward to it. Question number 2. How much do the absences of MK4, PS1, and Gold bring the collection down, in your opinion, if at all? A notch or two of disappointment. But there's just too much else here for me to really be too upset about, you know? It's kind of like being served a fancy 18-course meal and they forgot the bread, buns, and butter, you know? It's still absolutely amazing, but you just wish you had that one last little thing to make it perfect. Yalasama asks, Jesus, so many questions. Number 1, what game and feature are you most excited about? I cannot choose. At the moment, I'm thinking UMK3 WaveNet. But man, a fixed trilogy. But MK4, you know, I think I might be a touch most excited to finally play WaveNet UMK3 for the first time. Maybe. Hard to say. Number 2, What is something that not many fans know about a particular game that you think will excite them once they find out? Tricky question. From where I stand, it's kind of hard to gauge what people know or don't know. Like, on the one hand, all these games are so well mapped out, and I feel like those of us who are interested for the most part kind of already know everything that there is to know. But on the other hand, I also recognize that the vast majority of players now are a few generations after me. A lot of younger players have probably never even played these games because they might seem primitive or whatnot. But you know what, there's no explaining to people just how much fun I think building and doing combos in Ultimate MK3 and Trilogy can feel. I think you're going to get a whole lot of new fans kind of falling in love with the versions of 3 that are on there in particular. And considering how MK4 has been all but lost virtually to the general public for years now, I'm also looking forward to seeing people behold the alternate MK4 costumes for the first time. Like, there's nothing like seeing Liu Kang in casual streetwear, you know? Number 3. Is this collection complete enough for you? If not, what version do you wish they would put in? Not a game like Gold, but a particular version of MK1, 2, or 3. God, yes, it is complete enough for me, with a couple of exceptions. But for the most part, yes. There's things here I need to play, there's things I'll never need to play, there's just so much to choose from. Aside from Gold, obviously, I want Trilogy 64, Game Boy MK4, but you know what? I'd love to see that Super Famicom version of MK2 that had the green blood thrown into this thing. That'd throw people for a loop. Also, I'd love to see War Gods in the grid. If you know, you know. Wink, wink. Serious, not serious. Don't know. Maybe both. Number 4. Is there any item that was widespread back then that they could have included for a deluxe/collector's edition that you think that fans would have really gone nuts for? I'll tell you this for free. I would sell the families of everyone listening for my own copy of John Tobias's Mortal Kombat 2 comic. I feel like everyone who's into these games should have the first 2 comics easy. Reprints of those would have been a great inclusion, but probably way too expensive to print and justify, though. Number 5. Anything particular which you're still holding out hope for? Like a feature or something, the art book, a poster, a fix of a character's move, da-da-da. There is very, very little John Tobias artwork out there for the Mortal Kombat 4 and Gold characters, and there's very little of it from MK Special Forces. We know that some of it exists, like you can see sketches of like the Black Dragons and Special Forces Attract mode. So I would love to get some good quality, brand new artwork from John for those games in particular, for Gold and Special Forces. That would be nice. Number 6. Music mode. Which tracks will you be listening to first? I will right away be checking out how the Mythologies and Special Forces tracks sound, assuming that they're playable. I am one of those weirdos, full disclosure, who does not stream music. I still use a player with lossless audio files, so I have every soundtrack to every mainline version of the MK games up to MK9 and beyond available for play at any time. But there were never really anything but low-quality MP3 game rips of Mythologies and Special Forces floating around. So I'll be very interested to see if those files are present and can be dug up from the Steam version in a good quality. Would make my day. Number 7. Music-wise. Any gems among the handhelds, MKA or Deadly Alliance in particular? Not to my recollection, you should not be listening to, looking at, or playing MK Advance for any amount of time. The game should come with a Surgeon General's warning. And I have never actually owned, nor have I ever had the chance to really sit down and play Game Boy MKDA and MK Tournament Edition much, actually, apart from some brief bursts some years ago. The Game Boy Advance did not have a particularly good sound chip. When they released FF6 on it, its sound quality was not great. It's the only really subpar feature of that port. So I will poke around, but I'm not expecting too much. Who knows? Chiptunes can be nice. I personally listen to the Genesis MK1 soundtrack on a very regular basis. It's unique and very funky. And Matt Furnace does not get enough kudos for it. Number 8. Are you surprised that they got this much in, given that they had to build the PS1 emulator, work so hard to get MK4 Arcade to even function, and fix up Trilogy with all the bugs that it has? Good lord, yes. Absolutely. If I haven't been clear up to this point, what they have managed up to now astounds me. And I get that people who don't know how game development really works might want more and more and expect more and see it as lacking, but it is not as simple as just throwing a bunch of ROMs into the machine. Number 9. Is it normal for studios to build their own emulators, and if so, why not just take an existing one and throw it in? What goes into it makes studios want to create their own? Tell you a secret. Buried deep inside the code of every platform emulator ever built, there exists a single line of text. And that line of text is the same across all emulators, and that line of text reads as follows. Upon usage of this emulator without express authorization for purposes of financial gain, I, creator of said software, reserve the right to make sweet love to your mama or papa or any inanimate object in your household of my choosing. Seriously, you can't just up and use someone else's work like that without express permission. It's a bad idea. The emulators themselves may be subject to copyright. The emulators themselves may be using copyrighted proprietary code from the original consoles that the developers probably didn't get permission to use. The short answer is you might be and probably are opening up yourself to a lawsuit if you do that kind of stuff, so you develop your own. Easy as. Is it normal for studios to build their own emulators? Yes, it happens in cases of backwards compatibility or, say, retro collections of old games, anyone? Bleezy asks, have you learned of any new secrets or Easter eggs that we may not have known before? Apart from all that possible nonsense I read about Ultimate MK3 WaveNet earlier, no, not particularly. The games are pretty well mapped inside and out. The last new discovery that anyone really made was the EJB menu in the 3 arcade games, and that was basically as close as it comes, and that was only discovered about 9 years ago, you know? I sincerely doubt there's anything else new that's left to find. Apart from the WaveNet stuff, that is. We'll see. Reptile1112, or 1012, asks, what version of 3 will you play the most, and which version will you play the least, including Trilogy? The answer for now is WaveNet UMK3. I do not intend to boot up MK Advanced at any point unless there is a trophy for simply doing so, which I think would be very merited indeed. Number 2. Do you want to get your ass kicked in MK2? Yes, you better bring it. I'm online every platform that's not Xbox. Do it. Assassin47 asks, do you want to get destroyed in MK Trilogy as well? You better bring it! To paraphrase the old MK Trilogy ad for the N64 version, 36 have been given life and 36 will take it away, and I look forward to doing so with each and every one of them. Bring it. Chuckle_FVK asks, Number 1. Do you think we will get photos of UMK3 Cabal and other things we haven't really seen from behind the scenes? It is possible. We do know that there's going to be a lot of interviews and stuff, and I would love to see some more behind the scenes footage of maybe Cabal being filmed, stuff like that. I actually don't know that there's any behind the scenes Cabal footage or pictures. I've never seen any, not that I can remember. Things like that. Second question, what things have you seen from this that are you genuinely impressed or very happy about? You've been hearing this as I go, yeah? Question 3. This should be going extreme, but do you at all think that they could make Reptile a playable character in MK1 with Scorpion's kunai and Sub-Zero's freeze? That's outside the scope of the game. It certainly could be done, but since part of the aim is to provide definitive and accurate editions of these games, fixing only what's broken, that would be too much. Making previously unplayable secret characters playable when they never were would fall under the category of ROM hacking, and there are very talented people out there who have done just that with MK1, plus MK2, plus UMK3. 4. I know we are getting a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. Do you see potential for seeing discarded or unreleased stage or title music? And that's a great question. But I would veer on the side of not very likely. There are some unused tracks from the Genesis version of MK2 that are floating around out there. There's some variations on tracks in Deception and Armageddon you can hear, through music players and game rips for those games and whatnot. But traditionally, MK does not have a whole lot in the way of unreleased music. When there is, Dan Forden usually did make it available, like the whole Screw tune for the unfinished stage in MK4 that's on the MK3-4 soundtrack. I'd be very surprised if there were unfinished whole songs kicking around that we've never heard. Some demos would be pretty cool to hear, though. Who knows if he kept them? DJ Timmy G asks, I already expect you to touch on the MK Gold thing. Thank you. So I won't bother asking about it, but what about the ports? Any noticeable ports you think are missing and wish to be added in a later update? Once more, my exhaustive list goes N64 Trilogy, MK4 Game Boy Color, MK4 PlayStation. Aside from Gold, I'd be quite happy if we could just get those. Rajaroth asks, what versions of the game are you getting? Physical and or digital? Yes. Dago asks, what's your favorite game from the collection? I have always had a very hard time choosing between MK2 and Ultimate MK3. Trilogy is not in the running, maybe surprisingly, maybe not, because of all its jank. I would probably go with 2 as my all-time favorite historically. Question 2 from Dago. Which version will you buy? Yes. Peendog asks, who did you main in the first 4 games and their variants, and why? And how good would you say are you at the old arcade games? Will there be a Netherkast Fight Night on or near release? In the first 4 MK games, I play almost everybody. I'm not sure I really have dedicated mains until 3. So to answer, MK1, Raiden. He was the guy that made the biggest impression on me all the way back when. Even to this day, I would say that there's something extra rewarding about playing him in MK1. He just feels like good and powerful and godly in a way I kind of can't explain. MK2, I love using Melina. The speed, maneuverability. It's also because I'm a fucking prick. MK3, I am definitely a cyber smoke guy above everyone else. Being able to play as him for the first time really blew my mind back in the day, even when human smoke became playable in Ultimate, although the human form is my favorite, I was just disappointed they didn't give him his own moves the way they did with Reptile, you know? I certainly played him too. Cyber Smoke, though, is just a lot of fun. He's the most fun for me to build combos with and do invisibility and mind games, and it's fun. MK4, my guy is Reiko. I find him the most interesting and entertaining character among all the new faces. It was a great time doing all those wheel kick juggle combos. Maximum damage all day. How good am I? Well, being humble, I would call the answer extremely. I am not quite at professional tournament level where you're like using run and glitch jabs and stuff like that. I know how to do those things and I can if I want to. But I never quite got up to that level where I was just playing competitively after the initial arcade period. I just fell off of it. I've never really been a part of any online MK tournament scene, so there's plenty of folks out there who I know can and probably will absolutely destroy me, just like I can probably destroy anyone playing these games at a casual level. I am probably the best person on the Netherkast Discord at the arcade games, although D4 and Cyborg can give me a hell of a fight. Will there be a fight night on or near release? You better goddamn well believe it. Shooter McMeaty asks, how long do you think people will play MK4 for? Like speculation on playtime. MK4 is a weird bird. As glad as I am to see it again, I don't think it's going to be too long and people begin to realize that in terms of gameplay, it's kind of a lesser MK3 with its own set of jank and a sidestep button. It bombed back in the day for a reason. People in arcades were playing Capcom Versus games and trying to enjoy Street Fighter 3 instead. So while it would be really cool to see it develop its own dedicated online following, I think that after a little bit of time has passed, folks are going to be more gravitating towards UMK3 and Trilogy in droves. That's my prediction. So I think the average amount of time people will spend with 4, a few weeks to a month. Number 2, do you think the behind-the-scenes features will show you anything you didn't already know? Probably not, but I'd love to be proven wrong. I've just been with this series a long time, dudes. Number 3, is there a chance that Digital Eclipse includes the unfinished beta build for Special Forces? I'm gonna say probably not, unless some sort of weird, strange, beautiful magic actually happens. Like, I'm pretty sure the game is still entirely prone to crashing, if I recall correctly. It is a very unfinished piece of work. It'd be nice to have a little feature on it in the behind-the-scenes stuff. That would be pretty cool. I'm just not expecting it. Number 4. What do you think goes into making a project like this? I know you've worked in game development before, so I was just curious to see if you had any insight into what kind of work goes into something like this. A lot of love, a lot of passion, and a lot of overtime. And I can tell by what we've been presented, and just how forthcoming they have been with information that all 3 of those things definitely went into this. It's a passion project, and for that, I am truly grateful. Number 5. Are there any tips or tricks you have for beating the arcade ladder on higher difficulties than easy? Gameplay was never really my bag, so any help would be appreciated. When it comes to MK1, the game is not too awful, I would say. Endurance modes can be tricky. I don't think it requires much apart from, patience and attention. But for MK2 and 3, believe it or not, the game can actually get easier if you jack the difficulty and you know what you're doing. Because the MK AI is always reacting instantly to what you do. Making it as reactive as possible from the get-go makes the AI much easier to exploit. If you jump backwards in MK2, the AI will follow you with a jump, and then you can punish them for it. If you jump backwards with a kick in MK3, the AI will throw a fireball, and then if you have a teleport punch, you can go right behind them and hit them. Stuff like that. There's a bunch of tricks like that, and when you get good enough at it, it kind of feels like you're not really playing a game, just exploiting bugs. And sometimes it's the only way to progress. I am really looking forward to people experiencing the 6-round ninja endurance fight in Trilogy. That's going to be amazing to watch. MK4 isn't too bad. In fact, I'd call it almost reasonable. Just be aware that the AI hates when you pick up weapons or items. It's like it just found out that its significant other cheated on it with you. BMC5558 asks, can you explain how rollback netcode works? In detail, not without being extremely technical. But in broad strokes, here's an excerpt from GameRant and GameSub articles that summarize it succinctly and quickly. Rollback netcode is a way of handling latency that improves online multiplayer experiences in fighting games. It kicks off in a unique way, which treats both players' inputs as local, effectively offline, and their opponents as a remote player. And rather than wait for an opponent's data to come in, rollback code predicts what each player is going to do next, which direction they're going to input, or which buttons they're going to press. The game will basically prepare all possible avenues that might occur and portray the most likely outcome. If things go differently, when the actual inputs arrive, it will adjust on the fly and roll back to the correct state in a split second. It sounds like magic, and in practice, it feels like magic, and it probably really is magic. 2. Best unlockables. I would say that nothing ever quite beat the feeling of unlocking all the hidden characters in UMK3 with the ultimate combat codes. They're adding in options to enable unlocking them right away, but to me that's no fun, although I totally get that may be too trying for audiences these days. Me, I am going to sit in front of my screens with 2 controllers or a controller and a keyboard like a dumbass, as I have done many times before in days of yore. It just feels good, satisfying, and rewarding to me. Number 3. The most surprising feature aside from WaveNet. I think the thing that is the most surprising aside from WaveNet is just the sheer insane, thorough amount of effort that's gone into polishing Trilogy. Easy. I would have expected MK4 on any kind of definitive collection. I would expect some version of Trilogy, but I would never have expected it to be polished up. That's what really gets me. Number 4. How many systems are you buying it in? Me, myself, Switch and PS5. I want this to succeed so bad, and I'm hoping for a PS2 collection. Yes. Okay, if people really want to know, which you seem to, I have purchased the game on Steam digitally. I have ordered the Collector's Edition from Limited Run for my PS5. I have pre-ordered the Deluxe Edition on Switch. I have bought this game 3 times. The only concern I have is whether my PS5 Limited Run physical copy will arrive for release date. Apparently you can pay them like $10 or something to ship the game first and get all the goodies later on. So odds are I'm starting at Steam at launch and then PS very shortly after. I basically bought the Switch version for variety's sake, just to have it on a different console. It's all about support, because I want this collection to do really well too. I really hope it does, considering just how much of it I financed. Rain Reptile asks, what game are you most excited to play solo, and what game are you most excited to play with friends? I am very much looking forward to playing Mythologies at my leisure, mostly frustration-free. As for socializing, actually playing people in Trilogy Online for the first time ever, competently, still blows my mind. I am looking forward to batshit insane Kintaro and Noob Saibot fights. As excited as I am for MK3 WaveNet, some of the fun is in how broken and jank things are. Sometimes. Honey asks, how excited are you to have a game with Serena as a playable character for the first time since 2006? Not as excited as Razor is. Sarah the Surly asks, odd question I've had written down for a while because I forgot to send it after the stage ranking episode. Would it be the Tarkatan Sex War Camp or the Tarkatan War Sex Camp? The answer is neither. The proper nomenclature is the Tarkatan Sex Camp War, which was a terrible conflict which claimed the lives of millions. And now a moment of silence because some parts of history are too horrifying to ever be recounted aloud. But we must never forget. Aim Dopeness asks, question 1. Which Mortal Kombat from the arcade era has the best soundtrack? Rank the top 4. My ranking goes 2, 3, 1, 4. 2 and 3 are, to me, undisputed classics. 1 is very good to great. And the soundtrack to 4, in my experience, is kind of a real love it or hate it thing, and I just like it pretty good. It's missing a certain something. It's very airy, kind of ambient. Question 2. If you were to add a new special move for a character in MK Trilogy, what would that be? What character would get this new special? Now I'm going to cheat here a little bit and just say I would give Johnny his nut punch back. Because if you didn't know, Johnny Cage has no nut punch in Trilogy because they filmed Chris Alexander after everyone else and they couldn't go back and film new groin-holding animations for the entire cast, so he's nut punchless. It's a very unfortunate, very unfixable reality that they could do nothing about that at the time. It feels so wrong, but it is what it is, sadly. Temp asks... Temp, who the fuck is Temp? Temp asks... Should Digital Eclipse fix the bugs, controls, and opponent AI of MK Advance, given that they are A. highly historical, and B. the only things that give meaning to the game's existence? Answer is no. They have already gone above and beyond the Call of Duty by exposing themselves to it. It's like the warp core leak in Star Trek II Wrath of Khan. I can only imagine how many people at Digital Eclipse have died behind glass after exposing themselves to this thing, after taking in the radiation. You are correct, Temp. The game deserves to be seen for what it was. Kenshi Master 16 asks, if this sells well, what do you hope the main takeaway is for WB and NRS? And how do you want this sort of release to translate to future endeavors? I want them to take away the fact that there was a magic behind the original presentation and gameplay behind these games that has been lost over time, piece by piece, in favor of experimentation and change for its own sake. I can appreciate those things, but I think if MK is going to have any kind of worthwhile future as far as new games go, it is time to go back to formula. I'm not saying we need carbon copies of what came before. I'm not saying that we need to reboot over and over and over again to keep doing MK1, 2, and 3 or versions of them. But I do think we need to get back to classic, fast-paced MK gameplay and to a presentation of the MK universe that's more familiar, if that makes sense. Sophisticated Abaddon asks, what are your interests in them bringing scrapped concepts to life as part of this collection? Examples being MK Nitro and the revisions of the games in that same context. And is that something you see as likely, or will they strictly stick to emulating the games as they were? Considering that stuff like MK Nitro was an unauthorized creation of sculptured software without the approval or consent of Ed and John, the answer is virtually none at all. Like, the closest we would get to a thing like that would likely be the Special Forces beta, and I don't even expect to see that. The focus is to present polished versions of MK1 for the mainline games that we know. Those alone that we've been missing a way to play them properly for so long, for so many years. I wouldn't really expect anything that's never been finished or was never authorized on top of that, you know? We're not gonna get, like, Belloc in anything, I don't think, ever. I'd like to see those things, like, outlined and behind-the-scenes stuff, sure, but some things just weren't meant to be, and I don't particularly have an actual need to see them realized, when they were never part of the author's vision in the first place. You may all be asking, why Shad's Soul Tomb? What's with that title? I've been saying I wanted to do a solo episode or series of my own for a while now, and I kind of feel like the last game knocked the wind out of all of us, and in some ways, I'm the last guy standing, kind of locked under a prison of sadness, but his soul is still very alive. Because I still feel the love for the series, you know? This collection's helping to reignite that, to remind me why I'm here. I can't say this is going to become a regular thing. I'm not going to start doing weekly or probably even monthly episodes, but Whenever I have something to say, or if people want me to say stuff about stuff, it's here, as an outlet. And lastly, Shad asks, why are you hearing this from only Shad? What do Temp, Razor, and Cyborg have to say about this? Or Smokeman, for that matter? On a slightly serious note, I have to say that Cyborg kind of joked last time that we're in our retirement years. And this is, sadly, not untrue. Temp has described himself as semi-retired in terms of broadcasting, and doesn't really feel as comfortable behind the mic these days, and I think his time in cybersecurity has made him very afraid to have his voice out there, because Lord knows what you can do with someone's voice these days, you know? Razor is very tired of the grind of producing Mortal Kombat content in general, of producing all these videos time after time, doing the weekly thing that we used to do whenever a new game came out. He wants to kind of distance himself from Mortal Kombat a little bit, and I can certainly understand why. I feel similar, but when it comes to the classic games that I love, I can talk about them all day, and I've always wanted to. Cyborg, I think, not speaking for him, or trying to speak for anyone, kind of lived for the hype of new Mortal Kombat games and seeing what was really coming down the pike when we didn't know what was coming down the pike, and the build-up, the hype, those are the things he loves the most, and it is kind of hard, I guess, to be hyped for something where you've already gotten all the history behind it, you kind of know what's on the table, even if you haven't been able to play it for a long time. When I joined this podcast, it was out of pure love for the MK series. And it's been 10 years, and I've had a lot of fun. Now, I'm not retiring. I don't think any of us are really retiring, going away forever retiring, you know? But I think it's time for us to acknowledge that things are never going to be as they were for all of us here. And I can and will talk about classic MK till the cows come home, but I'd say the days of regular Nethercasts are at their end. It's time to call a spade a spade. But I'll talk about Mortal Kombat's classic era whenever there's something to really talk about. I will always be here to do that, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about the things I love. Not to have 10 years of diminishing returns, not to be angry at guest characters, stuff like that. I wanted to talk about MK because I loved MK, and I still kind of do. I just can't be doing it all the time and racking my brain, wishing things were better when they're not going to be. But this, my friends, this is better for me. This is what I've wanted to see for a long time. And it's happening. Sometimes, you can go home again. Prepare yourselves to get your asses kicked. Before I sign off, one little bit of MK news popped up today. As we all know by now, Dan Toasty, not Whoopsie, you casuals, Dan Toasty Forden, composer of Mortal Kombat's music from the beginning all the way up through the 3D games, and less frequently from the 3D era games beyond, but still doing guest spots and producing and appearances here and there. Our main sound guy, Dan Forden, has left NetherRealm Studios. When asked why, he said he just feels like he's been around long enough and he wants to reclaim that time for himself, to pursue other creative endeavors. And I can certainly understand that. I'm a massive fan of MK's music. I have the soundtracks on CD. I have all 4 soundtracks on record. I didn't need to buy them, but I did anyway. I've got rips of games that never had official soundtrack releases. It's very fair to say that Dan's music has provided me with enjoyment and happiness for 3 decades now. And I always looked out for his compositions. I always gave a listen. I really liked Sea of Blood and MK11, you know? I was always listening, and I never once was disappointed by anything he produced. So Dan, hail and farewell. We will miss you. Today's the first day of the rest of your life. Stay toasty. Thank you as always for your part in the games we're about to play and replay. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, John. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone at Digital Eclipse, for what we're going to enjoy next month. That's all from me for now. I'll see you when I see you. Have a nice day.